for the holidays. So thank you guys who joined us today. You'll get a notification here in just a moment that we are recording our call for all of our friends who are not able to join us today. So just a quick heads up there. Anything you unmute yourself to share will be recorded and will live on in memory forever. Welcome to today's soft skills seminar. I am super excited to have market director out of San Diego, Southern California, Junior on the line today. So I'm very happy to pass the mic off to you, Junior. Junior, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mary. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this call.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to have you. You want to go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. I see that we have a smaller group today, so that's great. We can have a little bit more of an intimate session and hopefully get some great participation and feedback on the topic that we're going to be going over today. I definitely think this topic is perfect timing for this time of year. I mean, going into the busy holiday season with Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's, this is that time when we just get so many people from around, especially our outside PF Chang's visitors that are coming from their PF Chang's locations and are used to things being the way that they have it there and being treated like celebrities because they're a regular when they go in. They're going to be traveling around to see their family and visit our locations, and they're going to walk in with those same expectations that we're delivering on, and with the volume that we're going to be experiencing and all the things that are going to be happening. We're going to encounter some bumps in the road. So I think this is perfect timing to talk about maintaining composure and actually reviewing what that is and some steps that you can take away with you from this call on how to handle some situations. So briefly, let me tell you about myself. My name is Junior Roland, just like Mary mentioned earlier. I've been with the company for about 18 years. I started off in 2005 at the North Miami Beach location, which was one of the busiest locations at that time, actually as a host on Mother's Day. And I've been with the company since for 18 years. So I think I've honestly been working on composure since my first day going in on a Mother's Day at a high volume restaurant. And I've worked at several locations and currently am the operating partner of the San Diego location and a market director for the company overseeing the Irvine locations. So as part of my role, I work with managers and operating partners out in the field and just really helping to develop and get everyone aligned with our company standards and just being who we are and figuring out how can we leverage that in our everyday responsibilities. And what we're going to do is talk about some of that stuff in reference to maintaining composure in some situations. So we'll go over to the next slide. And we'll start off by reviewing a quote from Thomas Jefferson. And it says, "When angry, count to 10 before you speak. If very angry, 100." And I think that's a very heavy quote. And we're going to revisit that a few times as we continue on through the presentation. But basically, the gist of that quote, is ultimately giving yourself time. You want to give yourself time to let that emotion dissipate and subside when we're in situations that may kind of stir our emotions or make us angry. And one that I actually, when I read this quote, it's funny because I have one that I actually repeat to myself over and over again. And I'm a big old time sitcom and movie buff, and I love The Honeymooners. And Ralph Cramden, actually played by Jackie Gleason, he has a quote, and there's an episode where he's dealing with anger and things like that, and he would repeat to himself, and pins and needles, needles and pins. It's a happy man that always grins. And he would say that 3 times, take a deep breath, and then he would re-engage into whatever situation he was in. And of course, the episode plays around comedy and things like that, so it doesn't work out in his favor. But it's really very similar to this quote by Thomas Jefferson. And then ultimately the same idea, is giving yourself that time to truly just stop and for a moment, catch your thoughts, just let that emotion that's rising in that moment just subside for a second so that you can re-engage and actually deal with what you're dealing with at that moment. So to move on a little bit further and dive into actually what composure is, it's defined as a calmness or response, especially of mind, bearing, or appearance. And as managers, our jobs are going to include the ability to tolerate a certain level of controlled chaos. And being effective at work is based more than just our technical skills. It's how we handle our frustrations and our critical issues, personality conflicts, communication breakdowns, and change. Maintaining our composure at all times, even at times when the chaos feels unmanageable, and we all know from our everyday that chaos can oftentimes feel unmanageable. It's really essential for us and our success overall as managers and as representatives of our company to make sure that we're maintaining that composure in these situations. And with all the deadlines, frequent interruptions, and the high level of interactions that we have with all of our guests and employees, our workplace is demanding on our personal time all the time. And we're likely to find ourselves in these situations where it's really critical to control our emotions, because if we do lose touch with those emotions at that time, things can really go in opposite directions. So we stop and we ask ourselves, how can we do this? What are some of the things that we can do to truly control our emotions? We can talk about it, but it's nothing like being in that moment at that time. All these things that we're going to talk about and teach today and discuss, are those able to come into actions? So the first thing we need to do is start by learning to identify when we're overwhelmed or upset. One thing that I often communicate to my managers and managers that I encounter is being self-aware. A lot of the times in everything that we do, we're not truly self-aware of how we're impacting others, or how what we say or do or actions just really impact the world around us. So being aware and understanding, hey, am I getting upset? Is this reaction that I'm having becoming overwhelmed? Is the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth or the next action going to be something that's just going to dig this a little further? Do I need to stop and take a moment? So doing this is going to help you recognize that it's that time to slow down. So you want to take a deep breath and focus on the moment and make sure we're staying in the moment. And I can't emphasize that enough, because staying in that moment instead of allowing the intensity of our emotions to take over, if we do that, it can really take you out of that current situation. You begin to build on pull from past emotions, like, oh, I've been lied to hundreds of times by these people. So the fact that I feel this person is lying to me today, I'm going to take out all this past fury that I have from, being lied to my whole life on this one guest that's complaining about not receiving broccoli in her sesame chicken or something like that. So we want to make sure that we engage in simple practices like breathing deeply before responding to an issue. Can definitely be a critical difference between a memorable moment for a guest or something that's truly regrettable. And we may not have control over the emotions of others, but we really want to make sure that we're trying to control our own. And you'll find that oftentimes in controlling your own emotion, it's just contagious. You being calm in a situation, that other person may pick up on it, and they may use that as a retaliatory thing, like, oh, they're being calm, I'm not going to let them be calmer than me, I'm going to be calm in the situation. And before you know it, you both are really talking it out and working through it rather than letting emotion lead the way. But it's really up to us to choose our emotional reaction to every situation. And as leaders, I think it's really important to make sure that we understand we have to think before we act. Even though emotions do come into play, we have to remember we're leaders in certain situations, and thinking before we act is really, really important. And if we consistently demonstrate this, in stressful situations, we're really providing important examples to our team members in these situations, because they view us. There's times where I do table visits and I'll have a server say, hey, you handled that really well. That guest was really upsetting me and they were just being rude. And I didn't think that there was anything we could do to make them happy, but it just seems like they're really happy and they're enjoying the rest of the meal and they're being really friendly to me now. So thank you. And that in turn just carries on to your managers, to the other servers. And before you know it, you create a culture in your environment, whatever environment that is, whether that be in a restaurant, in an office, outside, in your home. You're just creating an environment where you're normalizing dealing with stressful situations in a calm way. So stop and think to yourself for a moment. What do you think of when you think about composure? What are some of the things that you do when you think of composing yourself? And we'll revisit that a little bit later on, and continue to open up conversation and talk about that. So we'll go to the next slide. So there's a few different responses that all of us can have when something bad happens, and although we don't have over control over a lot of the negative events that are happening in our day to day, it's one of the reasons why I personally love working in a restaurant. I could never sit in an office or a cubicle and do the same thing day in and day out. I love the challenge of walking into that restaurant and knowing that there's going to be things that come my way that I might not necessarily know how to deal with. And we have to anticipate that. We have to go into our everyday knowing those things that come up. So we don't have control of what's going to come our way, but we really have control about how we handle them. And we have to ask ourselves, do you maintain composure in these situations when things do come up that are outside of what you have planned for your day, or something that's just going to throw you off? Do you maintain composure? Are you normally calm and cool, collected, or do you fall apart? It's natural either way. However you deal with it, some of these things are natural, and you don't ever want to look at it or beat yourself up, but stop and evaluate. And again, going back to becoming self-aware, just realize, what can I do to change this? So on the screen, there's some responses to stressful situations. I'm going to read through them real quick, and you can just go over them as well. But some things we can do: you can cry. Emotional breakdowns very easy. I know people that cry easily, and we tend to look at this as a sign of weakness, but it's just emotion. When emotion becomes overwhelming, our body does crazy things, and crying is one of those. You can choose to persevere, just get through it, and make it happen no matter what the outcome, good, bad. You're just going to get through it. You can become angry, very natural. Again, another emotion. You can become defensive. It's easy to take things personally, but learning to step outside that personal feeling and avoid the angry, and figure out how can I deal with it in a way where I'm not becoming combative. Making a new plan. Sometimes we just start from the beginning, just take it back to the drawing board and draw up a new plan. It's like, oh, this course of action is not working. I thought I had this under control, but not. So rather than get emotional, cry, or any of those things, we're going to come up with a new plan from the beginning. Some people tend to withdraw. We recently, and we're hearing a lot about quiet quitting and things like that. And, just withdrawing from the situation, you completely just set yourself apart and be like, I don't care either way. Whatever happens, happens. You just don't want anything to do with it. You shake it off and you keep going. A lot of us have that mentality. I'm a runner. I'm going to fall. I'm going to stumble a few times, but I'm never going to stop running. I'm just going to get back up, shake it off, and keep going with bloody knees and bloody elbows, but I'm just going to keep going. Some people tend to just give up. They just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to figure out if I can handle this, if I can get around this or not. I don't want to deal with it anymore. So take it out of my hands and I'm done. Or finally, welcoming the challenge. And I think that's natural for a lot of us restaurant managers. Although there's a mixed bag of all these emotions in our responses, I think we all welcome a challenge every day. I always say, to be truly successful in this industry, and even with PF trains in general, there's just a little bit of we like a little bit of that self-inflicted pain, and welcoming that challenge of knowing I'm going to have that difficult guest come in today. There is going to be somebody that's really going to make it hard for me to give them an amazing day or an amazing dining experience, and I'm really going to get around that and make it happen. So welcoming that challenge. We'll go to the next slide. So I want to share a time where I actually lost my composure. 18 years with this company, and then many years more in addition to the 18 years with other concepts and other hospitality companies. There's been a lot of things that I've encountered personally that have really challenged me, and I won't sit here and say I've been great at maintaining composure from day one, because that would be a lie. I'd probably say my first 7 to 8 years of being a manager just truly were about me learning to maintain composure and stepping outside that realm of taking things personal and realizing that I represent a brand, I represent an experience, I represent more than me in this moment, and I have to think that way. So there was a time where, and this was during COVID, this experience that I'm going to share, which was already a challenging time, but it was during the time where we were coming out, we were allowing guests to dine in, we still didn't have bar service. I had a guest come up and order a drink from the bar. We weren't allowing guests to drink at the bar, but we were allowing them to take a drink and stand outside in our waiting area and enjoy it. and a bartender that they happened to serve a guest a drink and allow them to stand at the bar and drink it. And when he ordered a second one, they asked the manager, "Hey, this guy's hanging out up here. Should I let him stay? Now he's ordering the second one. Do we tell him to go?" And the manager decided to tell the bartender rather than approach the guests themselves, to just tell the man that unfortunately he's not able to enjoy drinks at the bar. He would have to take his second drink and move outside. So that was done. The guy complied, went out, took his second drink, went out and waited in the front. While he was in the front, he saw empty tables because we were spacing out our seating and where people could go. And he was frustrated that he couldn't keep his seat at the bar where he was at enjoying his drink. He was frustrated that now he had to sit in the front and be in a group of people. We were telling him he couldn't have his drink at the bar because we were trying to social distance, but now we made him wait in the front around a group of people, and then he sits and watches empty tables. So he yells at the host and becomes upset, and he sits down. My assistant operating partner happened to be there at the time, tries to help the guy. The guy is frustrated, calling him all sorts of names, just upset at the whole situation, saying that, we're worthless, we don't know what we're doing. So he comes to me and says, "Hey, Junior, this guy's out there. I've done everything I can. Doesn't seem like we're going to be able to make him happy. I think we may have to ask him to leave." So I went into the situation, just thinking to myself, all right, this is going to be a tough one. If my assistant operating partner couldn't pacify or make this man happy, which he's great at, this is going to be a tough one for me. So automatically going into the situation, I knew this man was upset. He's already engaged with the manager. His emotions are on level 50. So I needed to come in and be that calm person. I needed to initiate the engagement in a calm way and let him know, "Hey, I'm here to help." So I went into that situation. I was like, "Hey, sir, so I understand today we've had some challenges in the beginning of our visit, and now you're at the part where you're here to do what you intended to do, and that's dine. And you just finished having a conversation with my assistant operating partner, and it seems like we've done some things to frustrate you today." And he was very physically frustrated, so I acknowledged that, and I can see you're frustrated. This is not our intention here. You came here to dine and have a meal today, and obviously along the way we've stumbled and we made some mistakes. So tell me about it. What's going on? And when I did that, he just let it all out. I let him be angry. I let him call us dumb. I let him call us the names that he wanted to call us because he was acting out of his emotion. He's not able to contain his composure. He's not able to be self-aware. He's frustrated. He's already at his first drink. There's alcohol involved. But when I listened to him, that was when I acknowledged, one, the manager that told him he couldn't sit at the bar. They didn't take that initiative and go and speak to him. So he's frustrated that we made a call and now we're telling him, "Oops, we made a mistake, but now you have to suffer." So that's not fair. Then he watches tables get sat all around him while there's empty tables everywhere. We're telling him we're doing this for social distancing, but yet we're making him stand in a lobby full of people. And then when the assistant operating partner came over, it wasn't, "Hey," it wasn't apologetic tone. It was more like, "You're upset. You're yelling at my host. This is not acceptable." So we went on attack. So we were literally hitting this guy from every direction when all he wanted to do was come in, have some drinks, and have a meal, during this crazy time of the world. And we were making that more difficult than it needed to be. And although we were preaching policy and saying, these are our rules, we weren't stopping and we weren't looking at the situation from a realistic perspective. And that's what we needed to do. So, I thanked the guy and I told him, I appreciate you sitting and even having a meal with us after all this. And I apologize, and I told him we're still learning. This is a difficult time and we're figuring it out. The rules change every day and sometimes we drop the ball, and I owned up to it, which is another thing when you're trying to maintain composure. If you're the one in the wrong, own up to it. That can change the tone immediately, because now that aggravated situation, you're taking ownership of that and you're saying, "Hey, I'm the one making this upsetting situation and creating this chaotic, exchange that doesn't need to exist." So I was very proud when I walked away from that. The guy was so happy by the end. And actually he's become a regular with his wife. And they come in, they're not the every month regular, but every so often they stop in and, "Hey, remember me? I'm the guy from the bar with the Mai Tai that called your whole team dumb." And we joke about it, but it was an opportunity to really stop and listen and look at it and figure out what was causing this situation and really just dive in and make it better. So That's something that I'm really proud of. And I think all of us can probably share some of those stories. But when you're going about your day, just kind of look at those situations. And I think sometimes we need to remember that we do have to stop and listen. We'll move along to the next slide. So for this one, we all know someone who's cool under pressure, and we all have that person in that life. So in our life, so I want to ask a couple questions. When was the last time you lost your cool? What were the triggers, and what would you have done differently? So stop and ask yourself that question, making sure that we make sure that we rely on that person that is that calm person to pull from those experiences. Asal, my executive chef, he is the most calm human being. We could have a $38,000 day in San Diego and be running out of every bit of dim sum, and we could have a walk fire happen, and the guy will just say, "We got this, Junior." And I literally go to that guy in the busiest times, and I look at him, and I want him to give me that energy that he has, and he knows he can do that. And there are times where he'll just put me aside and be like, "Hey, let's step outside for a minute." He'll just talk to me for 5 minutes, and he'll say, "I just wanted you to step outside so you can get out of there. Now let's go back in and let's finish the shift." But knowing that you have somebody like that in your court, I think it is really great. Next slide. So the next slide, I really like this one. And when I read this, I actually read this as Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, and I read it as "You shall not pass" with him and the giant staff, and I kind of imagined myself doing that. So this is actually a quote by, it was part of a short article by a gentleman named Adam Kahn, who wrote this, and it basically was talking about when you're stressed, you're losing your set. It's easy for you to lose your sense of calm. So a key to ease the strain in the moment is just making sure that we understand this moment's going to pass. We're not here forever. There's a very vivid description about Abraham Lincoln when he was in the White House. He experienced stress, and it was a huge understatement. He was making soldiers go out into the field, getting slaughtered by the tens and thousands. And he knew as a leader that he had no other choice but to send all these soldiers to their death. And being an empathetic man, it took its toll on him, and he didn't understand how to deal with this. And at the end of the day, what he needed to understand is this was going to pass. This was a time in his position, in his role as the president, and making these decisions on what he needed to do, and sending these soldiers out. Thank God we don't deal with that, although at times our shifts do feel like we're sending our team out to war. It's just making sure that you understand at the end of the day, there's things that we need to do and we need to conduct within our roles, and those stressful situations, although they seem so intense today and so intense in that moment, tomorrow when we look at them in retrospect, it's really going to be a thing of the past. So remember, although in that moment your response is to get excited, get upset, cry, get angry, that's going to pass, and tomorrow you'll be laughing. So never stay in that moment too long. The next slide. So we've talked a lot about already on how it's important to maintain your composure. So now we're going to talk about some ways on how to maintain your composure. So there's 12 tips to stay positive in negative situations. And I think these are a great 12 tips, and we'll go through them really quickly. Never respond when you're not calm. I think that's a big one. If you're not sure that you're calm, don't respond. You want to make sure that you always are able to get your thoughts out in a clear way, in a way that's not emotion filled, and you're saying things that you regret. Make sure you take a deep breath. Taking a deep breath is important. And there are times, my Apple Watch nowadays, almost everyone has one. They tell you to take a deep breath, to stop and breathe. Sometimes we forget it's go, 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 and the hustle and bustle of the shift gets to us. We really need to stop and calm ourselves down before we continue. Speaking in a gentle tone, I really like that one. And in the situation I described to you earlier, this was really what helped pacify that situation and really keep it down. I went in knowing the guy was already high on emotion. So I wanted to go in and say, "Hey, I'm the guy here to fix this." And I needed to present myself in that way. So speaking in a gentle tone was really helpful to reducing the tension in that situation. Next one is realizing that you can find opportunities in negative situation. Albert Einstein said, in the middle of every difficulty lies an opportunity. And there's so much truth to that. In this negative situation that I shared with you, I really could have continued to perpetuate that negativity, but I chose to find, an opportunity to turn it around. And it really worked for the better. So try to find ways to realize that there's opportunity in every negative situation. uh, Looking at the content, what people say, sometimes there's something positive. Like when we get guest feedback that's negative, I went to the restaurant, a lot of the times guests are ranting and raving about all the things that are wrong. And sometimes there's a lot of embellishment in there, but there's always one thing. And I look for common denominators in that feedback. What's the one thing I'm hearing? Your restroom's always dirty, small portions, burnt proteins, whatever it is. There's something that you can pull from those negative statements sometimes that you can really find valuable. So don't look at it always as something that's negative, realizing that there's something that in that content that you can actually do. And if it is completely negative, all that other stuff that you find outside of the positive, just ignore it. Maintaining a positive view of people. You might not like people's messages or the behavior, but that doesn't mean you don't have to dislike them personally. And people feed on that. We want to make sure that they understand this is not personal. This is just, us dealing with the situation in the moment. Realizing that having negative feelings will just hurt you. When you realize that if you have a positive view of people, you'll realize that those feelings, negative feelings towards them, will hurt them. So you don't want to do that. If you're open, if you make mistakes, be open to admit it. And there's a quote by George Bernard Shaw, which says, "A life spent making mistakes is not only more honorable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing." So that's just like in that previous situation. We were making some mistakes along the way as managers with this guy that was upset about not having his drink. So just owning up to it really changed the outcome of that overall situation. Talk to a positive friend who can encourage you. That's my SL, my executive chef. That's the guy that I go to when things are not working for me in my restaurant. I know I can go to him and he's going to be my support system. Looking at a negative situation as your training sessions for real life. That's been the last 18 years for me, like everything that I find out, every negative situation I've encountered. And I think that's for all of us. It's just how we learn and grow, is just using them as training, and I tell it to my managers when they feel beat up about a situation. I was like, hey, just look at this as practice for the next 2 weeks of what we're going to experience during Christmas Eve, Christmas, and New Year's, like chalk it up. It's just another day in the life of us. And look at this. Let's learn how we could have done better. Let's try to be proactive and avoid these situations. But let's take that into our future experiences. Um, and realizing that you can't please everyone. I mean, finally, at the end of the day, we encounter hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people every day. There's going to be one person that you can't make happy, no matter what you do, no matter how much you bend over backwards. It happens. Don't beat yourself up over it, and don't feel like you failed at your job or you didn't achieve something. You're going to encounter those people, but take what you can from that experience and really learn as much as you can from that. But don't hold on to it. Let it go. Next slide. So when we think about maintaining composure, one of the most important things is being patient, and patience is often cited as one of the most sought after virtues. Patience, simply put, is the ability to wait. I think we're all pretty patient, as it's part of what we do every day. I mean, just dealing with people, but it makes sure that it requires us to be calm and purposeful. We want to make sure that ultimately patience is management about finding the right time to act. So in a perfect world, we would all be patient, but in our normal world, there's no limit to the number of situations that can cause us to lose our patience. So we're gonna look at the screen, and there's a list of common triggers. I'm gonna go over these really quickly, and I'll just run through them. These are things that can tend to, contribute to us losing our patience. So hunger, lazy people, being overworked, physical pain. I mean, just having a headache can make you lose your patience. Rude people, a lack of sleep, late employees, being rushed, not being listened to, angry guests, boredom, traffic, loud people, meek people, inefficient processes, and dramatic people. So when we look at all those things, I mean, three of those alone are people. If you see loud people, meek people, dramatic people. So when we go back to remember, you don't ever want to make somebody feel like you don't like them as a person. There's just actions that they're doing that you don't like. So all of these things can contribute to us losing our patience. So be aware of that. And if you can acknowledge that some of these things aggravate you, it will also help you control your reaction to these situations when these things occur. And some of these we just can't avoid. So we have to understand ourselves. The opportunity is with us, not necessarily with the actions that we're encountering. So for the next slide, we're going to go through the four primary practices to help us maintain composure when dealing with a tough situation. We want to make sure we stick to the facts. The facts contribute to clarity and keep the focus on the elements of the situation. Facts establish and maintain useful boundaries, and facts provide a basis for meaningful dialogue. Sometimes we tend to let opinion sneak in when we're dealing with situations where we have to maintain composure. That's probably one of the worst things. Opinion can just lead to negative interaction, negative discussions, or opposite opinions that can just really clash and help contribute to escalating an aggressive situation. So just stick to fact-based information because it's stuff that you can find proof to support your argument. Staying in the moment, we just went over that. Intense emotions can make it difficult to figure out what's really going on. Don't let the intensity of your emotions keep you from seeing the truth, and don't let emotions from similar situations or experience in your past transfer to those situations. Concentrate on what's happening then and now. When you stay in the moment, like I said, you don't want to pull from, the best friend 15 years ago that stole from you. So now, you're taking out the, fury of the world on this person because you think they stole. Just stay in that moment and deal with the situation, and make sure as a leader you're controlling that in the conversation. Keeping it real, don't play games. Know your true motives and take ownerships for your thoughts and feelings. Keep in mind that there are legitimate differences between people and what's really happening in a given situation. Genuine is part of who we are. It's our values. It's what we talk about every single day. So be genuine. It goes a long way in these interactions, and when there's games being played and just hidden scenarios and things like that, it just can really lead to misleading outcomes. And then finally, being courageous but wise. Accept that you can't change and change what you can. Know the difference between the two. We can't change everything, just like we can't make everything, everyone happy all the time. So we have to make sure that we can accept that sometimes we can't change the outcome of a situation. It is what it is, but how can we deal with it, and how can we understand why we're having trouble dealing with it? All that comes into play when thinking about how to maintain your composure. So we want to make sure that we are looking at a certain couple things, and this one acronym is one of the biggest things that we do as restaurant managers and as leaders. And I groom future leads in our market, and one of the biggest things I talk about with them is blast. And I'm just going to quickly go through this for the sake of time, but when we think of blast, it's so important, and all my managers talk about it just because I've made it important to them. And I'm never one for like these cheesy kind of corporate, acronyms and things like that. Sometimes I look at them and I'm like, we just looked at that and created something off of it. But this is a big one, and blast is just basically believe, listen, acknowledge, solve, and thank. When we go into situations with our guests, believing is so important. Part of the early stages of me being a manager and just learning was going into a situation, understanding that everyone's not trying to get something for free. And I took it as like, this person's trying to get this from me, or this person's trying to take something from me. And I had to stop and understand, hey, maybe what they're saying is true. There's that anything is possible. So stop and believe. And listen. Sometimes we jump in and we want to have all these solutions and we want to assume so much. We don't listen to what the guest is actually saying. Just like I did in the scenario I shared with you, I just let the guy go at it. Just get it all out. Let me know what's going on. Just stop and listen and let them talk, and don't respond until they're finished or till they stop, but just listen to them. And then acknowledge what's making them upset. Acknowledge the situations that's causing, the aggravation in the situation. And then we have to step in and do what we're here for. It's our role to solve. How do we creatively figure this out. I've once had a restaurant visit where the manager asked me, what would you like me to do to make you happy? And it's like, I'm not here to work. Yeah, I'm here to dine. I'm here to spend money. You're the guy that's in charge. I want you to figure it out. How do you solve this? And how do you make it so that the solve that you come up with is going to be beneficial to the guest and not a solve that we're giving them the minimal and just trying to make it beneficial for us? And then thank them. Oftentimes when we finish getting through all the other three, the believe, the listen, the acknowledge, and solve, we don't close it. We don't seal the deal. And that's so important. That follow-up, that cherry on that whipped cream, that hot fudge on that sundae. It's important to make sure that we stop off and we just thank them. Thank you for letting me fix this for you. Thank you for coming in today. And not just with guests, with your employees, like, thank you for understanding my point of view in this situation. And thank you for allowing me to give you the feedback, but just sealing that deal and thanking them for listening to you and getting a positive or even sometimes a negative outcome in a situation. Next slide. So I'm going to read a scenario really quickly, and I know we are short on time. So if anybody wants to shout out any sort of feedback, feel free to. If not, we can just kind of read through this and we can go through it together. But in this scenario, guests return to the restaurant. They're extremely upset about a takeout order. This is the second time he has gotten all the way home and is missing an item. You're the only manager in the building and the restaurant is starting to get busy. Before you have a chance to assess the situation, the guest finishes his account of the situation by calling you an unpleasant name. So the two questions we want to ask ourselves in this scenario is, how will we mentally prepare to talk to this angry guest, and how can we take control of this situation or keep the guest from verbally abusing us and potentially offending other guests who are within earshot from further upsetting the angry guest? If anybody wants to unmute and chime in really quickly, please feel free to. If not, then we can just kind of go through this together really quickly.
Hey, Junior, this is Cody. How's everybody doing? Hey, I just had this one come up not too long back in one of my restaurants, so I can take this one.
Perfect.
I think that you nailed it. Earlier you talked about preparing ourselves, and what do we do in that scenario? How do we kind of maintain composure? And I know that probably a manager's worst nightmare is to kind of walk up to a table and get blindsided by all these different things that are going on at the table that are negative. So first thing that I like to do is get as many details as I can. I know in this scenario, it sounds like we probably should already kind of know if this is a second time around that something has already happened with this guest. And if we don't know, I'm sure the team members do. So I would definitely do some fact finding, but don't have a whole lot of time. Obviously, the guest is here again. So doing a quick fact finding mission would be one thing that I would definitely prepare myself for. Also, going into that scenario, really just reminding myself of that blast, that believe, listen, apologize, solve, thank. There's not going to be a whole lot of convincing needed here. I mean, the guest is clearly upset and they want their food, and they've been back more than once. So really kind of just set the stage there is how I would prepare. Just, could be anything. It's, it's possible that we know that they've been cursing out team members in that case. So kind of part of that next step, part of the second part of the second question is really setting some boundaries for the guest. If that comes up in my recoveries, I like to just let them know, hey, again, I'm really apologize, but one thing we can't do is use profanity and be verbally abusive to myself, my staff. So as long as we got that clear, I'm here to help. But we do need to kind of establish some boundaries there and let the guest know. Usually that will do it, will diffuse it. And if it doesn't, I think to Junior's point, allowing them to vent at this point, there's probably going to be a good amount of venting. You might want to move the scenario from away from other guests, away from other team members, and kind of isolate yourself and really kind of calm the situation or diffuse the situation that way too. I think moving it away from a lot of commotion and other conversations really helps slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, Cody, I couldn't agree more. I think that was definitely, exactly how I would handle the situation, myself too. And one of the things that I really liked that you said was, going into the situation, you decided to, quickly gather some facts. You acknowledge the fact that you're short on time if the guest is here already. So we don't want to make the guest wait and prolong the situation and contribute to the aggravation, but you do want to have a fact based conversation. So you need to quickly gather that information, and get creative on how you do that. And that's part of what we do every day is figure that out. But going into that information with the facts, and again letting him vent, like you said, just let the guy get it out. But one of the things that I really love that you said, and I think when we looked at this question is like, how the first part of the question too is, how can you take control of the situation? You acknowledge that profanity was being used, and I think it's very easy for us to say, oh, I'm not talking to you because you said a curse word, or you said this, and it's like, we're humans, things happen, emotions, things slip out. But I am gonna, own the situation and say, hey, I'm here to help, but I really appreciate it if we don't, continue using profanity. I want to help you out, and I'm here to make the situation better. So allow me to do that, but let's talk to each other with respect. And when you go into that situation, typically the person on the other end does acknowledge that and say, okay, and then they slightly become self-aware, and they're saying, I need to diffuse this part of me if I want a result out of this. Now, if the guest is just an irate guest or just upset and said I'm being upset, and if they're going to be that one guest that we can't help and they continue using profanity, then we make our choices then at that point as leaders and do what's best for our self-respect and our team. But I think you hit the nail on the head with that. So thank you for responding. Does anyone else want to add anything before we move on? Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. All right. So now we're just going to have a quick recap on all the information. We did go over a lot of information, and I am a chatty Cathy, so I tend to talk a lot. So I spoke about so many things, and again, I really think this was a valuable topic going into the weeks ahead that we're about to encounter. And even for us tenured managers that have been doing this a long time, sometimes we get set in our ways and we forget to stop and recalibrate and remember the 101s of restaurant management, and how our daily decisions and how we engage with each other and our team members and our guests really impact and lead the way for our future managers. So just remember, we never want to respond when you're not calm. You always want to take a deep breath. Remember, breathing is very important in giving you that moment to collect. Speak in a gentle tone. Realize that you can find opportunities in negative situations. Look at the content. If it's negative, simply ignore it. Maintain a positive view of people. Negative feelings will just hurt you. If you make mistakes, admit it. Talk to a positive friend. Look at negative situations as your training sessions. Realize that you can't please everyone. Stick to the facts. Stay in the moment. Keep it real. I can't emphasize that one. That it really changes the outcome of so many situations when we're genuine and not this cookie cutter robot that we feel like we need to be. Be courageous and use blast when navigating guest issues, and work to find patience. Talk to that calm person in your life and make sure you're always asking them, how do they maintain composure? Ask them for their tips on the things that they can say and do to help you, and learn from them. And that's all that I have for you today. I took a lot more time than I was allotted today, but I really can't emphasize the importance and all of you going out and making sure we're maintaining composure. That not only the holiday season ahead of us, but in your everyday. We're in the industry of hospitality, and that's being hospitable to people, and we need to understand that people walk into our bistros, whether from an employee aspect or a guest aspect, and we have no idea what's going on in their worlds before they hit our restaurant. And a lot of times, just dining is a form of mental therapy. And we need to be aware that we encounter hundreds and hundreds of people from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different upbringings every day. And we're going to encounter these challenges and situations that we never thought would be brought to us. But how we maintain our composure, how we deal with these situations, how we respond, that's what represents PF Chang's and just us as individuals and our future leadership. So it's important now more than ever to take this topic and take it back to your teams and just share with them and look for that person that has composure in your everyday life to help give you some tips and pointers. So that's all that I have for you today. Always feel free to reach out to me in San Diego if anyone needs anything. And thanks for giving me your time. And sorry I took a little longer than I was allotted, but hope everyone has happy holidays this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Junior. A great presentation. And like you said, I really couldn't have put it any better. Now is the time. We're going to be under lots of stress. We're going to be very busy. And so now is the time to really focus on maintaining composure. But thank you all for joining us today. You guys know the drill. I'll send a recap out with the recording of the call as well as with the deck itself so you can share it with your management teams and everyone can work on maintaining composure this holiday season. Also, we are going to be canceling our next call just because it'll be right after the new year. We're all going to be still pretty busy. So we're going to take a break and we're going to pick back up in mid-January. So everyone, if I don't talk to you before then, have a lovely holiday season. I'm very excited to hear how successful the next few weeks are for all of you. But thank you so much for part of your Monday afternoon. And I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your year. Thank you, Junior. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.